Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something pretty crucial, risk management frameworks.
That's right.
Whether you're maybe prepping for a meeting, trying to catch up on best practices, or you're just curious about how organizations handle uncertainty, well, this deep dive is for you.
Exactly. We're focusing on two big ones today. The NIST Risk Management Framework, or RMF, and ISO 31000.
Mm-hmm.
And we know you might be coming at this from different angles. Maybe you need the step-by-step, maybe just the big picture.
So our mission really is to guide you through this. We want to clarify, how they're similar, how they differ, what are their core ideas, where do they fit best, all without getting totally lost in the weeds.
We'll try our best, and just so you know where we're coming from, our discussion is grounded in the NIST Special Publication 837 Revision 2.
Which is a really solid source.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very comprehensive, put together by a joint task force, civil defense, intelligence communities, all weighing in. So a great foundation for understanding the NIST side especially.
Okay, great. So let's dive in. Maybe start with the fundamental purpose. What's each framework for?
Good starting point. So the NIST RMF, looking at SB 837, it's very much focused on managing security and privacy risk, specifically for information systems and organizations.
Right.
And it has strong ties to the U.S. federal government. It's actually mandated by OMB, Circular A130. The goal is a process that's disciplined, structured, but also flexible.
Flexible, okay.
Yeah, and what's really key is how it integrates security and privacy right into the system development life cycle.
Yeah.
The SDLC.
So embedding it from the start. Planning, building, testing.
Exactly. Build it in, don't just bolt it on later.
Okay, so that's NIST, RMF, very targeted. IT security, privacy, U.S. federal context. How does ISO 31000 stack up against that?
Well, ISO 31000 takes a much, much broader view. Think of it as an international standard for risk management, period.
Not just IT.
Not just IT. It's designed to apply to any type of organization, big, small, public, private, whatever, and all kinds of risk. Financial, operational, strategic, safety, you name it.
So it's more of a universal toolkit.
Kind of. It provides these high-level principles and guidelines for managing risk generally. It doesn't give you the same detailed step-by-step instructions for one specific area like IT security. It's more about fostering resilience across the board.
Okay, that distinction is really clear. NIST RMF, deep dive on security privacy, especially federal IT. ISO 31000, wide angle, any risk, any organization. So let's dig a bit deeper then. What about the core principles or concepts? How do they work?
Right, so the NIST RMF works through 6 main steps. You've got prepare, categorize, select, implement, assess, authorize, and monitor.
Seems very structured, like a checklist.
It looks sequential, and it often starts that way. But, and this is important, after that initial run-through, these steps can become really iterative. You might loop back. Things can happen out of order,
Okay. Not rigidly linear then.
Not necessarily, especially in the long run. And NIST really emphasizes continuous monitoring. They even talk about ongoing authorization, aiming for almost real-time risk management.
Real-time. Wow.
Well, near real-time. The goal is to move away from static assessments. Plus, it strongly pushes linking system-level risk management up to the bigger organizational-level risk picture. SP 839 talks a lot about that multi-tiered approach.
Okay, so a structured cycle, but adaptive, focused on constant vigilance and linking up the levels. What about ISO 31000? Does it have similar steps?
Not in the same prescribed way. ISO 31000 is built around core principles. Things like risk management should be integrated into everything the organization does.
Integrated, okay.
Yeah. And it should be structured, comprehensive, but also customized to the organization. It needs to be inclusive, dynamic, based on the best info available.
Sounds like a philosophy almost.
In a way, it also stresses considering human and cultural factors and always aiming for continual improvement. It gives you the framework, the scaffolding, but you tailor the specifics. It's not a fixed procedure list like the RMF steps.
Right, which makes sense given its wider applicability. Okay, so how do they handle the actual, figuring out what could go wrong? Risk assessment.
Good question. The NIST RMF puts a lot of weight on risk assessments. They happen at the organizational level, that's in Task P3, and also down at the individual system level, Task P14.
Both levels.
Yep. And these assessments are pretty detailed. They look at threats, vulnerabilities, the likelihood things could happen, and the impact.
Impact on what?
On pretty much everything. Organizational operations, assets, people, even other organizations or national interests.
Okay, broad scope of impact.
Definitely. And notably, it explicitly includes privacy risk assessment, looking at harm to individuals from handling PII. And supply chain risk management, SCRM, is baked in there too.
So very thorough on the potential harms, security, privacy, even third-party stuff. How does ISO 31000 approach assessment?
ISO 31000 also sees risk assessment as fundamental, absolutely, but it describes it more generally. It talks about risk identification, risk analysis, and risk evaluation as the core parts.
More general terms.
Exactly. It doesn't prescribe the factors you must consider in the same level of detail as NISTRMF. It gives organizations more flexibility to tailor that assessment process to their specific risks.
Okay, so NISTRMF gives more specific prompts, especially for IT, while ISO 31000 gives the principles for assessment, but leaves more room for adaptation. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So you've identified risks. Now what? How do you decide what to do about them? Selecting and implementing controls.
Right. With NIST-RMF, selecting controls is quite a process. It starts with categorizing the system based on its security needs. That's task C2.
Categorizing, like high, medium, low impact.
Essentially, yes. And that categorization then drives the selection of a baseline set of controls, which you then tailor. That's tasks S1 and P4. And it points you towards specific control catalogs, like the big one, SP800-53B.
Ah, so it actually references lists of controls.
It does. And it gets even more granular. The RMF talks about common controls things implemented centrally, maybe by the parent organization, that multiple systems inherit. Think task P5.
Okay, like network firewalls, maybe?
Could be, yeah. Then you have hybrid controls, part common, part system-specific, and then purely system-specific controls unique to that one system, task S3.
Lots of layers.
Definitely. And all this gets documented in security and privacy plans, task S4. Plus, you're supposed to develop your continuous monitoring strategy right alongside this, tasks P7 and S5.
So it's very structured. Common, hybrid, specific controls all documented, tied to monitoring. What about ISO 31000? Does it tell you which controls to pick?
No, not directly. ISO 31000 talks about choosing risk treatment options. Your options could be avoiding the risk, accepting it, modifying it somehow to reduce likelihood or impact, sharing it like buying insurance, or just deciding to retain it.
More strategic options.
Right. It guides the decision-making process for choosing the right measures based on your risk assessment and how much risk your organization is willing to tolerate its risk appetite. But it won't point you to control X or control Y.
Okay, another key difference. NIST-RMF gets quite specific on security controls, often using catalogs, while ISO 31000 focuses on the treatment strategy. Now, you mentioned a specific authorized step in NIST-RMF. That sounds important.
Oh, it's critical. This is the formal gonna-go decision. There's a specific role, the authorizing official, or AO. This person formally accepts the risk of operating the system. That's covered in tasks R1 through R4, and M6 looks at the ongoing aspect.
Accepts the risk. So it's a management decision, not purely technical.
Absolutely. And crucially, in the federal context, this responsibility cannot be delegated. It underscores accountability right at the senior level.
Can't pass the buck.
Pretty much. The AO makes this decision based on the authorization package. That includes the security and privacy plans we mentioned, the assessment reports showing the testing results, and any plans of action and milestones, or POAMs, for fixing weaknesses.
The whole dossier.
Exactly. And interestingly, the RMF also has a concept for authorization to use when dealing with external providers, like cloud services. The big takeaway is that explicit senior-level accountability for the risk.
Right, a very formal sign-off. How does ISO 31000 handle that kind of acceptance?
Well, ISO 31000 definitely emphasizes accountability for risk management throughout the organization, but it doesn't have that distinct, separate authorization step performed by one specific official in the same way. Risk acceptance decisions are more integrated into the overall management process.
Okay, so a major structural difference there. NIST has that gate, that formal acceptance point. ISO 31000 weaves it in. So after implementation and after authorization for NIST, what keeps things on track? Ongoing management improvement.
Yeah, neither framework sees risk management as a set-it-and-forget-its activity. NIST-RMF really stresses continuous monitoring. Task M2 is all about checking if controls are still working effectively.
Constantly checking.
Right. And Task M3 is about managing changes to the system, because changes introduce new risks. Task M4 involves keeping that authorization package up to date. The idea of ongoing authorization means the system's security posture is reviewed regularly, triggered by time or specific events, not just once every few years.
So it's dynamic, adapting to changes.
Exactly, especially vital in that federal space with evolving threats and strict rules.
Makes sense. And how does ISO 31000 approach this ongoing part?
ISO 31000 also emphasizes the cyclical nature of it all. It talks about monitoring and review, not just of the risks themselves, but of the risk management framework itself and how well it's being implemented. And of course, continual improvement of the risk treatments.
So both push for continuous vigilance and improvement. NIST maybe outlines more specific IT-focused activities, while ISO gives the broader principle across all risks. Okay, let's loop back quickly to who these are really for, the target audience.
Sure. NISTRMF, as we said, its primary target is clear. U.S. federal government systems and organizations. That's driven by laws like FISMA and OMB policies.
And contractors, too.
Yes, its relevance definitely extends to contractors handling federal data or running systems for the government. Its detailed, security-heavy nature fits that regulated environment.
Got it. And ISO 31000's audience.
Much wider. It's designed for broad applicability.
Yeah.
Any sector, public, private, nonprofit, any country. It's a guideline, remember? So it's adaptable for organizations facing all sorts of risks and operating under different rules.
So if you're not U.S. federal IT, or you're dealing with risks beyond cyber.
Then ISO 31000's principles might feel more directly applicable day to day.
Right. NIST.mandate-driven specific domain, ISO. Voluntary guideline, universal principles. Okay, despite all these differences, surely there's some common ground, right? What are the big similarities?
Oh, absolutely. There are fundamental overlaps. First, both are trying to help organizations understand and manage risk better. That's the core goal.
Makes sense.
Second, both push for a structured approach, even if the structures look different. Third, both get that context is critical. You have to understand the organization, the systems.
Can't manage risk in a vacuum.
Exactly. Fourth, as we just discussed, both stress ongoing monitoring and adaptation. Fifth, both involve figuring out what's valuable your assets and what could happen to them.
Identifying assets and impacts.
Yep. And finally, both work much, much better with strong commitment from leadership and clear roles and responsibilities. NISTRMF actually calls that out specifically in Task P1.
Okay, those are some significant common threads. Structure, context, continuous improvement, identifying what's important, needing buy-in. Good. Now, to really nail this down for everyone listening, maybe we can just quickly recap the main differences.
Sure, let's try a quick summary. A big one is specificity. NISTRMF is way more prescriptive, detailed steps, tasks, especially for information systems. ISO 31000 is more of a general guideline.
Prescriptive versus guideline. Got it.
Then there's the mandate. NISTRMF is largely required for the U.S. federal world. ISO 31000 is voluntary, an international standard people choose to adopt.
Required versus voluntary. Okay.
The focus is different, too. NISTRMF zooms in on security and privacy for IT systems. ISO 31000 has that much broader scope, all types of risk.
IT security, privacy versus all risks.
Right. The authorization step, that formal sign-off by an AO in NISTRMF, that's unique. ISO 31000 doesn't have that specific standalone step.
Formal authorization versus integrated acceptance.
Exactly. And lastly, the control library. NISTRMF points to specific control catalogs like SP 853. ISO 31000 doesn't prescribe controls. It focuses on treatment options.
Refers to controls versus doesn't prescribe controls. That's a really helpful summary. Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive today.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, both NIST-RMS and ISO 31000 are valuable tools for risk management. NIST gives you a detailed, fairly prescriptive roadmap, especially tailored for information security and privacy in the U.S. government context, with that key authorization step. ISO 31000 offers more general, adaptable principles, applicable anywhere to any risk, focusing on integration and always improving. Which one fits best? Well, that really depends on your organization's specific situation, your industry, regulations you have to follow.
And hopefully understanding both gives you a much clearer picture of the landscape. You can see how these principles apply in lots of different professional, maybe even personal situations.
It does raise an interesting question for you to think about, though. Consider the risks you deal with in your own work or things you're interested in. Would a more prescriptive approach like NIST's or a more flexible, principle-based one like ISO's actually work better there? Something to ponder.
That's a great takeaway question. And if you do want to dig deeper into either framework, definitely check out the official NIST publications online or look into the ISO standards themselves. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.